to start with the good old Neanderthals. A lot of misconceptions about Neanderthals out there. Okay, so let's start with the first. I'm going to have this run by the questions and comments people made here. And so here goes the first fellow. And he says the following. He says, I've had a heritage test, 23andMe, which tells me that I have 2.9% Neanderthal DNA. Well, good for you. Congratulations. You're a Neanderthal, okay? I bless you. Okay? Apparently, Europeans have 2 to 4% Neanderthal DNA because of some previous interbreeding commencing about 45,000 years ago. Is 23andMe wrong? Well, yeah, I think 23 and you are wrong. Both. These people go out there to have an analysis of their blood, and they want to find out if they have Neanderthal blood in them. And, it's become a cottage industry, people having their DNA analysis out there to find out, how, first of all, about their own family, and then about, whether they have any Neanderthal blood in them. And these are two different things. People say, hey, Bill, these geneticists, they can tell you tell you who a killer was. For example, they get all these cold cases. They go out there and look around, they look at the DNA and say, it was this guy. And they look for him and they find out that he's guilty and then the guy's convicted and goes to prison, right? Yeah, they can tell you that. But the geneticist cannot tell you is if the killer had sex with the girl he killed. Okay, they cannot tell you that. Unless they do, they do a little swab down there, and analyze that. They cannot tell you through the DNA analysis whether they had sex. Okay? And this is more or less the situation with Neanderthals. They can tell you something about whether we have a certain percentage of DNA from the Neanderthals, right? They can do that because they just compare, the genomes. And, but they cannot tell you, whether we had sex with them. Okay, and that's where the problem is. You have to remember this fellow Svante Pääbo. He got the Nobel Prize a couple years ago, medicine I think it is, and he got it for doing the genome and proving to the world that Neanderthals and humans had sex, right? And that's how they disappeared, because that's what they were trying to prove. And you have to remember that in 2007, 3 years before he published his paper, his genome paper, he was already declared by Time magazine to be one of the 100 most influential people on the planet. Okay, so they already were grooming him to be somebody, and it turned out the prediction came true. 3 years later, he published his paper, and 10 years later, he got a Nobel Prize. So this was all political science, nothing to do with science at all, just political science. And if you look at Svante Pääbo's papers under Green, okay, et al., and if you look at his paper, what they talk about is, the words that they use are perhaps, maybe, there's a probability. That's how they talk. But when it reaches the public, it reaches like, it's a fact, we've proven it, believe it. And so we have a very big difference between what's on the paper, on the official paper, and what they tell the public. And this is the issue. I mean, if you want to believe that, that's fine. That Neanderthals disappeared because they had sex with us, their smaller population dissolved in ours, etc., etc. But you have to keep the context in mind. The context is they're trying to convince the public that they did some work and they deserve some credit for the work they did. And, so one thing is trying to convince people, and another one is doing science, objective science. And, a geneticist is really not a scientist. Geneticist is a guy who looks at base pairs and compares DNA and chromosomes and so on. The machines, in fact, do it for them. They don't count billions of base pairs one by one with their hands, They have the machines, they have the programs that do it for them, and they just compare and they reach their own conclusions from the data they receive. Okay, so to extrapolate that and say, geneticists can tell us whether we had sex with the Neanderthals, that's a little too far-fetched, especially if that happened 40 to 45,000 years ago. That's one issue. The other one, you got to keep in mind is, how did the Heidelbergs disappear? Homo heidelbergensis. How did he disappear? Did he disappear when Neanderthal had sex with him? Is that how the Heidelbergs disappeared? How about Homo erectus? He disappeared when ancestor had sex with him. Is that how these species disappear? I mean, it's an idiotic theory under any circumstance. So, interbreeding doesn't happen between two different species. Once these guys are separated by thousands of years, they cannot connect anymore and have children. But even before that, well, I'll get to that a little later on how they reproduce. How do they reproduce in the wild? And people don't even have the slightest idea about these things. That's where the whole problem starts. So, like, what I can tell this fellow is, no, I don't. If you had 2.9% Neanderthal blood in you, well, congratulations, you're a Neanderthal. I do agree with that. Yeah, it never happened, never will. Okay. Another fellow, he says the following. He says, let's see here. He says, I'm working on a completely different theory that explains that Neanderthals were in fact the same species as Homo sapiens. Okay, and all I can do is, on the one hand, show you morphology, their characteristics, and the head is very noticeable. Not only the head. If you look at their bodies, they were a little different as well, quite a bit different, in fact. But look at the head. I mean, the heads are very different. And that's half of the equation, okay? That's half of the argument. The other half is when you do the DNA on these two guys, they're very, very different. There's only 2 to 4% similarity in their DNA. That's one issue. Then the other issue is that Neanderthals inherited no human DNA. We inherited no Y chromosomes from the Neanderthals, meaning we had no male alive today can prove, or there's any evidence that we had a male Neanderthal father, right, in our lineage. And then you have the mitochondrial DNA. We have none from any female Neanderthal, meaning that no human alive today had, or there's no evidence that we had a Neanderthal mother. So there's no similarity whatsoever between Neanderthals and us from a genetic point of view, and there's no similarity in the morphology, in the structure of our bodies, and especially the head. So where these people get the idea that they are Neanderthals, I have no idea. It's just a fad that's going on that people want to believe, okay? And that's fine. If they want to believe this nonsense, it's got nothing to do with science, okay? And there's a third guy here. He says the following. He says, he said this last week. He said, they are just projecting this extinction because what? The people that rule Europe want to genocide Europeans. Talk about tin hat, okay? This is politics. This has nothing to do with science. And they bring these notions that they have, and they bring them in to science. They should keep these things away from science. They should not even mention that when they talk, because all they do is just make themselves amenable to ridicule. But then he says, you didn't get my point at all. And he's totally right there. I did not get his point at all, because I did not think that he was saying that we Europeans, I'm from European stock ultimately, right? That we Europeans, that we are Neanderthals. I didn't think he was saying that, but that's what he's actually saying, that we are Neanderthals, okay? And he's making a distinction. Again, I think this is more about racism and politics than it is about science. Europeans are Neanderthal. Africans are Homo sapiens. Aha. Europeans and Africans are different species. So, we're different species. We're not different races. We're species, okay? Europeans are 99.7 Neanderthal. Homo sapiens equal black Africans, okay? We get the notion now. Neanderthal, white, blonde, and blue-eyed Europeans. 100 years ago, like today, Neanderthals had fair skin. How does he know that? How does he know that they had fair skin. We don't have any sample of skin from the Neanderthals. Where did he get this? He just extrapolated, and because he wants to believe that, he's got no evidence. We never recovered any skin from any Neanderthal, okay? And he says, you say white men like me went into Europe and apparently interbred with Neanderthal, implying you are a white Homo sapiens. That's not what I said. This is what I said. Let me point this out because it's kind of important in the discussion. I said the official story, not mine. It's the official story, okay? The official story is that they did not mix with Africans, okay? That's what I said. That if anything, Africans got it from people, like me, white men who went into European territory, found a Neanderthal, allegedly interbred with them. Maybe they interbred with them in the Levant, and from there they took the genes to sub-Saharan Africa. They say that people in Southern Africa, okay, not me, okay, not me, they meaning idiots like Svante Pabo, okay? They say that people in Southern Africa have very little Neanderthal blood. That's essentially the argument. They say the reason for that is that they did not mate with any Neanderthals directly. So what Pabo and his group and all these other so-called geneticists and paleontologists, what they're saying is that, that the reason, let me put myself in there for a second here, that the reason sub-Saharan Africans have the least amount of Neanderthal blood is that they did not do it directly. This is the official story, okay? The mainstream story. And that they got it from people who got it from the Neanderthals. So it was a second influence of sorts. That it was the Africans, white people, I guess, maybe they were black, who knows, who went into Europe, encountered them Neanderthals, maybe they encountered them at the Levant. They had a big party, drank beer, exchanged wives, and here we are, thousands of years later. That's the official story. And obviously the official story is absolute poppycock. It's nonsense. It has no validity in science. It's people trying to convince people. That's all that it is. Persuade them that, that we had Neanderthal fathers and mothers, okay? And he continues, says, Neanderthal mated with Homo sapiens. Interbreeding happened in northern Africa and Middle East with black African Homo sapiens. And he tells me to go see Marie Cachet's work. Cachet, she's, I guess, a French lady. And I looked her up, find out who this lady was. And I'm not going to recommend them to any rational individual, but this is more or less what she said, okay? Let me put her on. This is what she has in a video where she talks about the Neanderthals. And what can I say? It's unbelievable some of these people really have these ideas. Here it goes. It says, the shape of his head, talking about Neanderthals, right, has considerably changed. They say that he had such a big head, right? He was a pumpkin head. Because of the pelvis of Homo sapiens, designed for giving birth to sapient babies with a much smaller head. This comes out of her site, okay? She's got a video on this. And it says, the hybrids with large Neanderthal heads died. So this is what this girl talks about. She believes that, we were Neanderthals, we are Neanderthals, and that we really got it from interbreeding with them, so who knows? They say that all the guys with big heads just couldn't come out of the woman's body, right? And so those died. Talk about natural selection. Yeah. This is what people believe. This is unbelievable for me. It's just incredible that they would believe such nonsense. And this fellow continues. He says the following. He just made me laugh, this whole thing. Can't take him seriously. He says, there is no example of two species that can produce hybrids together for which 100% of the offspring are 100% sterile. Okay. If one generation of hybrids is born, an indefinite number of generations can be born. Okay, the ligers and tigons you mentioned have been mated again for several generations. Not true, and I'll go into that in a second. The same goes for mules. Not true. Whether these hybrids can survive in the wild is a different story. Yeah, he alludes that problem, but the problem is even before they can survive in the wild. The question is whether a donkey and a horse or a tiger and a lion will have babies to begin with in the wild. And this doesn't even cross their minds as this question. Is it possible for a tiger to meet a lion in the wild, in the jungle, in the forest, in the plains out there, and say, hey, let's have sex? Boy, it must be starved for sex, These people are thinking only about sex. And so, this is what I have to say about that. Here it is. This is my answer. A mule has 63 chromosomes, intermediate between 64 of the horse and the 62 of the donkey. Okay, mules are usually infertile for this reason. Pregnancy is rare, okay, but can occasionally occur naturally as well as through embryo transfer. A few mare mules have produced offspring when mated with a horse or donkey stallion. Okay, so you gotta pair the mule with an original, an authentic horse out there in order to have another baby, another generation. Mules cannot mate with mules, and I don't think these people understand that. Okay, that's one issue. And here's the other issue. Let me show you this one. And this is the lion version, right? Talks about lions. Here it is. In fact, let me remove this one. And it says, can a liger, liger is a lion with a tiger, right? Have babies. The female liger is fertile and can have offspring with a male lion, producing a lily liger, or a male tiger, producing a tie liger. Okay, the male liger, on the other hand, is sterile and cannot reproduce. Okay, like the liger, male tigons are sterile, while the females are fertile. At the Alipur Zoo in India, a tigoness, right, born in 1971, was successfully mated to who? A male Asiatic lion. It's got to be a lion. Can't be another liger or tiger liger or tigon. Okay, it's got to be one of the original guys. Okay, and again, these people don't look at all these details. There's no evidence that ligers mated with other ligers or with even tigons if they want, that they're going to continue reproducing the liger tigon species. No such monster. But again, the main point is that this does not occur in the wild. In the wild, in the jungles, in the forests, and these people don't understand that. They think that, tigers can find a lion, for example, in India, they're in the same region, and they can mate and have a party and drink beer and, exchange wives. And this is absolutely incredible that people don't understand these basic things. Part of the reason these people run into trouble is they never define their terms. They don't pay attention to words, to vocabulary, to definitions. And that's where the whole problem starts. I mean, this fellow doesn't know what the word species means or is. He probably never defined it. It'd be nice if he did, because then we know what he's talking about when he says that Africans are different species than European. Man, a lot of these, Hollywood artists, the girl is out there with a black guy. I guess they're different species. That just made me laugh, So here it is. Races, this comes out of I think this one's from the Wikipedia. Says, race is categorization of humans based on shared physical or social qualities into groups generally viewed as distinct within a given society. We're talking about, racism here, okay? Politics, right? The term came into common usage during the 16th century when it was used to refer to groups of various kinds, including those characterized by close kinship relations. By the 17th century, the term began to refer to physical, phenotypical, right, traits, and then later to national affiliations. We're getting into racism here, national affiliations, right? Modern science regards race as a social construct, an identity which is assigned based on rules made by society. Yeah, I don't like you because you have yellow skin or you have brown skin, so I don't like you. Okay, that's what it's all about, right? And says, well, partly based on physical similarities within groups, race does not have an inherent physical or biological meaning. The concept of race is fundamental to racism, the belief that humans can be divided based on the superiority of one race over another. Okay, so what does that have to do with? It's got to do with politics. Okay, don't talk about race. Were Neanderthals and humans of the same race? Were they of the same species? Were they two different species, in which case, they cannot mate. Why? Because what is the difference between race and species, right? That's where this guy has to really look into it, and the other fellows as well, right? Here you have it. Race, biology, right? An informal taxonomic classification within a species, generally within a subspecies. So race has to do with the fact that they're the same species, meaning, if you see on the right there, organisms in which any two individuals of the appropriate sexes or mating types can produce fertile offspring. Okay? And by fertile, meaning that once you have a Tygon or a liger, that guy can continue the new lineage, the new dynasty, and have kids with other ligons and tigers, Tygons and ligers. Okay, then you can say that it propagates, that the species is reproductive and will continue forever. And here you have the morphology of different dogs there, and all these are from the same species. All these dogs can mate with each other. Okay, and they can have viable kids, and they look so different. You say these are different animals, and they're not. They're all the same species. Okay, and they just have very different morphology. Humans, something similar, not as badly as the dogs, but we're color coded. We have blacks, yellows, whites, and browns, more or less. I don't know if there are other colors out there. Maybe there's some green people, for all I know, or blue ones, right? But these are the general colors out there. We call them by colors. We just assign colors to them. But it's when we discriminate, we do it on the basis of this color. Especially against blacks. Slaves were blacks in great measure because they were easily distinguishable. That's why they got them as black, because if they were maybe somewhat brown, maybe Mexican, or half-breeds with Spaniards, whatever, maybe they would have been so easily recognizable. But being black, hey, that was easy. It's that black guy. He's a slave, That's how easy it was. And you can see on the right, you have these different species. Tigers and lions are different species because they cannot have really fertile offspring. They're half and half, just barely, fertile. Some of these Tygons or ligers, and they have to mate with an original lion or tiger, right, in order to have children. But what's the issue? The issue is that this doesn't occur in the wild. You don't find a tiger against a lion in the wild. You don't find a donkey against a horse. And for sure, you will not find a Neanderthal against a Cro-Magnon. So this is where the problem is. And again, this is part of the problem. The question is, would a Neanderthal mate with a human, with a Cro-Magnon? Here the Cro-Magnon, right? The Cro-Magnon come into Europe, and they see this individual, Neanderthal. Neanderthal is completely nude, except for all the fur that's covering him, more than likely. I don't know, because I wasn't there, and we don't have any skin from the Neanderthals. I'm assuming this, right? He was the woolly man. He was covered with wool, with hairs all over his body. That's what I think he looked like. And he had no sandals, no boots. His feet were directly on the ice, on the snow. And you say, how can that possibly be? How can this animal, this monkey, right, be out there in the Arctic with his feet on the ground? And again, what I keep saying is that the Homo erectus or some offspring of his, maybe ancestor or Heidelberg, was already in Europe, 800,000 years ago. We have evidence of two-legged creatures in England, in southern England, in Kent, in the Kent area and so on. And they were already living in the cold, and there were no clothes at the time. So these are monkeys that got used to the cold after thousands of years of being in the Arctic weather, and they were like the wolves and like the bears today. You know, they have no problem going, barefooted in the Arctic weathers. You know, I don't think I've ever seen a polar bear with tennis shoes. You know, I mean, you'll never see that. And same here with the Neanderthals. Neanderthals were offspring from some two-legged creature, Erectus, Antecessor, and Heidelberg, any of those, right? They were descendants of these previous creatures. They were already used to the cold, so they had no clothes. They had no clothes for sure 400,000 years ago when they were born, okay? When the species was born. So here they are. They're hunting in their own grounds. And the question is, how did they have children? Would they have children with a human who comes in from outside? And again, people who say that have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know anything about anthropology. They don't know the basics. Okay, and the basics is the following. You know, how did Neanderthals reproduce? Did they go out to the next cave next door? You know, they lived for hundreds of thousands of years, just Neanderthals there. There were no humans there. How did these monkeys live? And the way they lived is, the way they reproduced is very simple to understand. The worst enemy of a Neanderthal was another Neanderthal. The clan was the country. The clan was the flag. That was the national anthem, right? So they had their own groups. They had their own clans, and they inbred within the clan. Now, there are other possibilities. And the possibility we can see with some of the behaviors of some animals today. The chimps, they have troops up to 100 chimps, right? What do? They go to war. They don't go to love, they go to war. Okay? And what they do, they invade another troop, they kill all the males. Guess what they do with the females? Well, I can't say it here, but they force them to change their last names. That's what they do. They force them to change their last names, okay? And that's how the clan grows, okay? That's one way, just one way, okay? There's another way, and we can look at the gorillas here. The gorillas are smaller groups, usually smaller clans, and it's one male with several females and kids, right? And a male is supposed to defend that group, okay? So they're smaller groups, and sometimes the females, primarily the females, but sometimes the females and the males go out of the group and form their own family. And other times the females go out and they find another male from another clan, right? And they get together and they form a new one, okay? So that does happen in the wild, and that could have happened with the Neanderthals. You know, the Neanderthals, it's not like the Neanderthals went out there and smoked a peace pipe with the guy next door. No, it's like the lions. You have to kill the other guy. There's no love between Neanderthals. Neanderthals killed Neanderthals. They were enemies, all of them, because they had to protect the hunting ground. Okay, so what you have really here is the following. There's an order, a pecking order, you could say, in Mother Nature's world. First thing you have to worry about is your security, safety, that you don't get killed. And the second one is food, that you have enough food. Love, reproduction, that comes much later when the season comes. Pheromones, flying through the air. Guy smells, says, oh, it's time for that good old sex. Otherwise, sex is not the thing on your mind like it is today on all these fellows, apparently. So the way it works is, every clan had to protect their hunting ground. And they probably marked their hunting ground. Maybe they pissed all around their hunting grounds. Hey, nobody comes here because this is our place. And if another Neanderthal happened to enter in that region, they would go to war. And sometimes maybe they invaded other caves and started killing the males, especially there, and take the women. That's the females, That's probably how it happened. So reproduction happened in that manner. Now here you have another species. This species is dressed because they can't withstand the cold. They don't have thousands of years of adaptation to the cold like the Neanderthals did. They're coming into somebody else's territory. Well, they would have been slaughtered. That's what would have happened to the humans. Now, what's the issue there? The issue is that humans went all the way east because there was nothing to stop them. But humans did not go to Europe for thousands of years. And the question is why? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the Neanderthals were there and they would have slaughtered them. any human party, any clan of humans that would have entered Neanderthal territory would have been slaughtered for sure. And so that's why there were no humans in Europe until 40,000 years ago, whereas humans, had gone all the way east. So you have them going east, which is much farther away to China and Indonesia, but you don't have them going into Europe. And I think they did venture into Europe, but whenever they got there, they were slaughtered. That's how I see it. And forget about sex. There was no way they would have had sex. I don't care what these people say from their 2% commonality in DNA, that we have 2% Neanderthal DNA. That doesn't tell me anything. It doesn't tell me if they had sex. And for sure not in the Levant. The Neanderthals had no reason to go to the Levant because they had enough game in their regions, and it was the humans who entered their territory. Why? Because they were probably seeking or following the herds. That's how it probably happened. Okay, so yeah, all I can tell you is that all these people have these notions about us mating with the Neanderthals, and what it is a cottage industry today. They're all trying to prove that we had sex with the Neanderthals. Why? Because of only one reason only, and that is that they cannot explain how the Neanderthals disappeared. How did they disappear? Their population pyramid overturned, and they lost genetic diversity. Neanderthal died all alone without our help. When they were gone, that's when we entered Europe.